office in Thunder Bay. And today we're going to go over protecting yourself. It's a bit of a weird presentation. There's two different aspects of it. There's setting financial goals and fraud protection. So we'll go through each of those as we get on here. So the objective at the end of this is you'll be provided information on how to manage your spending, as well as create a realistic budget, in addition to learning basic financial protection so that you can avoid fraud or being the victim of fraud. As a disclaimer, all the information in this presentation is modified from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada's Financial Basics Workshop. If none of you have ever heard of the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, we've referenced it a lot during Financial Literacy Month. They are a government agency of Canada that is all about consumer financial information. And so they're a great resource if you have any specific questions that you don't want to see a lawyer or a banker because they might know the answer, but they do have an agenda. This is just pure Government of Canada information. Which is they have some really great stuff. We'll get into that as we go on. So financial goals. So when you're setting financial goals in terms of what you want to do, there's a few things you want to keep in mind. You want to prioritize them. So you want to decide what is most important to you, choose some goals to focus on, and then write them down would be the next step. So the idea is to get a system in place so that you have something you're working towards. It helps with the motivation of either saving or building a plan to pay off debt, such as after you graduate. And then you want to check your progress and regularly ensure that you are staying on track. So this isn't a once a 2-month, 3-month thing. You want to be checking at least once a month, maybe even more. Adjust if needed, and make SMART goals. So what are SMART goals? There are specific, so well-defined or focused goals, measurable, so can they be tracked to measure achievement, achievable, so you don't want to do too big or like really small nothing goals. You want them to be within your abilities so they're realistic, which leads us to the next one. The goals have to be realistic. So considering current and expected conditions, so you don't want to be aiming pie in the sky high. You want to be aiming on a realistic ground that you can actually achieve in a timely fashion. And so you want to set a time for the achievement, like 4 weeks, 6 months, 2 years. And smarter goals is the next step if you want to get really advanced. And here you want to break goals down into small steps. For example, if you're trying to cut expenses, cut takeout lunch to once a week, which if it's savings $20 a week, that's $1,040 a year. So small steps in a timely manner makes a real difference. For example, cutting restaurant meals to semi-monthly. So might save $100 a month, $1,200 a year. Or work extra shifts a few days a month, earn $300 a month, that's an extra $3,600 a year. So the big goal of I need to save a lot of money, for example, save an extra $5,000, can be cut into small little goals like I'm not going to eat out lunch once a week, and maybe I'll pick up a few extra shifts at work. And so in 12 months, all of these things total $5,840 a month. Just a few different steps that we can take can make a real big difference to our annual budget. And the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada has a financial goal calculator online. This is actually excellent. I know in one of my first presentations, I had mentioned that the budget calculator that the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada has is like a really great resource. And this is another one they have that is, honestly, it's phenomenal. So here it is. If you type in financial goal calculator, Consumer Agency of Canada, you're going to pull it up right away into Google or Bing or whatever you use. And it basically allows you to make a goal in terms of getting out of debt or any saving goals you might have. So it's a really great resource that I highly recommend checking out. Financial Consumer Agency Canada have a lot of really great tools. Their budget is awesome. This is also a great tool when it comes to actually saving or getting ready to get out of debt and pay that debt off as quickly as possible, making a plan. Before I get in too much into the financial fraud and protecting yourself from different types of scams, I do want to highlight another area when it comes to financial planning. It's something that I think is just really important that people are aware of is retirement planning and saving. So the beauty here is compound interest. We won't get too much into it. It's already been covered in another seminar that we've done. But for those of you who didn't attend, I just want to highlight this as something just to be aware of, is that the time that you're saving money makes a really big difference to how much you can actually save. So here it's a difference of 10 years. So someone starting to save, not necessarily aggressively, but save on a steady rate, actually putting time into putting money away, if they start in their mid-20s, the amount of money they're saving is either the same amount or way more than if they were to start in their mid-30s. And so you can see here in this graph, if you're putting together $180 a month 10 years earlier, you're going to have the same amount than someone who's saving way more aggressively later on. But if you start putting $480 a month 10 years earlier, you're going to get a lot more for your bang for your buck. So it's definitely important just to consider that starting early is a really important thing. And it can make huge differences by like ×2 type of differences. All right, so let's go into the next aspect of what we have for the presentation, which is fraud and protecting yourself. So the little quiz in January 2014 to December 2016, it is estimated that Canadians lost over something million to fraudsters. How much do you think that was? Take your guess. So 405 million. It's a lot of money. And so this is something that is certainly rampant. It is only getting a little bit worse. And so it's important to know kind of what to look out for as the little tricks and things are getting a lot more complicated and a little bit harder to spot sometimes. So, for example, you may have received this at some point, CRA scams, the Canadian Revenue Agency. They are everywhere. And so as an example, you might get an email like this. Dear client, you received $458 Canadian from the Canadian Revenue Agency. Click accept to deposit your money and then respond immediately. This message expires in 24 hours. So something like this, you can really tell the signs. The email address is like, what is that? Payments.interact.ca. What is that? You have dear client, you're getting an email from the CRA. They don't email you. Accept your money. They have a time limit. They want to get you in an anxious state by saying it expires in 24 hours. Better make up your mind quick. All these little tricks are designed to socially engineer you into doing what the scammers want. And so it's important just to be aware of what they're doing, as it's very rare now for you to actually get like hacked per se. It's all about social engineering, about making you give up information willingly, not realizing that you're giving it to a nefarious source. Another example would be fake job ad signs. So offered considerable pay with few to no duties, promises payment of wages instead of cash, contains no physical address or contact person, requires you to open a new bank account or accept money checks to test a wire transfer service. This one is relatively common. If you receive like a check and you're like, oof, I forgot, or like, hey, just set up this bank account. Basically, they're going to give you a check that is not valid and will bounce, but it will be enough for them to take some money out of your bank account first. So different things like this can happen. Social media scams, fake polls, links, apps. So you could download malware or spam your friends, fake messaging or phishing. The classic, like you get the message saying, "Oh my goodness, I saw this. I saw you here. What are you doing?" And it's just a link. Yeah, that's a scam. If you get those through like Facebook Messenger or something like that from one of your friends. Um, and so it asks you to log into a fake site and then steals your ID, for example. Fake friend requests, gather data to spam or scam, and fake money transfer or crowdfunding requests. So there's just a lot of different things. Basically, the idea is that just be vigilant. There's a lot of sophisticated minds at work trying to scam you. And so it's just the idea of just be careful with what you're doing. So how to protect yourself. You don't want, the biggest thing is just to get in the habit of not sharing personal information freely. It's simple because it is, and it may sound like something you would be like, oh yeah, of course, I don't do that. But like, we all have our little moments of we're expecting a phone call from the bank, we get something, and we're like, oh my goodness. Like, the idea is that some of these things just get under your skin if it's just the right timing. And so just always having that in the back of your mind, if you ever get a call, like, just don't give information over the phone. It's always, I'm going to give you a call back. What number do I reach you at? And just like get in that habit of never giving information over to a phone call if someone calls you, for example, and always going onto the actual website of the company, making sure that the phone number you got a call from is legit, and then giving them a call back that way. That way you always know who you're calling is secure. Shred documents with personal information before discarding them. So if you don't have a shredder, some scissors could work. Just like cut them up like crazy kind of idea. But just like you don't want huge, like large documents just in the trash or recycling that can be seen and just someone can just like go in and grab them from the dumpster. Not ideal. So things like that you want to just be aware of. Keeping your wallet and purse safe. It's a big one. Trying to limit the amount of things that are in your wallet or purse. So if it gets stolen, your entire life isn't stolen. It's just a few things that you can replace. And that leads into my next thing is don't carry ID you don't need, such as your SIM card. So I'm going to ask this to everyone in the chat. Check your wallets right now. How many of you have a social insurance number card in your wallet? I know one of my friends kept a social insurance number card in his wallet, and it got stolen. His wallet got stolen, and he had to get a new SIN. Not ideal. That is a huge workload to just try and get that documentation. There's no real reason you need to keep your SIN card with you at all times. If you don't remember your number, it doesn't take that hard, like doesn't take that long to memorize a 9-digit number. And typically you don't really need to memorize it if you don't need to. Like it's doesn't come up all that often. So those are the kind of things that you just want to be wary of, is try and minimize a few things so that if you need to replace cards or verify your identity, you always have some extra information that wasn't stolen, like passports, a SIN card. It's really easy to replace a credit card, not so easy to replace a government ID. And limit the number of credit cards you hold. So if you have all of your credit cards with you at all times, they get stolen, so it's a big hassle. Only like one or two, you still have some that are left over, you're going to be a little bit better off. And check your credit report once a year. So this is a big one. There are like company hacks and things like that that you might not be aware of. And so you always want to be vigilant in terms of keeping tabs with your credit score, keeping tabs with who's taking out credit under your name within the system. And so like if, for example, if you bank with a local credit union and then you look and you see like, oh, someone took a big loan out with RBC, for example, RBC is not going to contact you if they think they're dealing with you. You will have no idea if this is happening if you don't check your credit report. And so it's really important to be vigilant of that, because you're not going to find out otherwise if there's some sort of huge outstanding loan from someone else in your name. And this is a big one. Make sure websites are secure before transmitting personal information. So when you go into the URL of a website, if it says HTTPS, that means it's secure. The S stands for secure. If it says HTTP, which is the common one, it's not a secure website. So any information you put through there is not encrypted. And so that's something to be really vigilant about. Typically, like companies and stuff and governments are good with this, but it is something you always want to be looking at. Is the information I'm putting in this website, is it like a secure website? Is it going to be encrypted while it's flowing through the interwebs, or is it not? So you always want to be looking for that S. Delete emails that ask for personal information. Don't open any links. Try not even open them if you can. Keep computer firewalls and spyware up to date. So the idea is that you want to keep your computer at always the highest private or like the highest security settings, things like that. If your phone is not up to date, there's always little security pushes that are going through with phone software, so keep that up to date. Keep your computer password safe. So this is a common one. I know like there's people in my family who just have a Word document on their desktop with every single password that they have. Oh boy, that is not secure at all. I think that's a really big one, especially nowadays when you have so many passwords. It is really important that you don't have them sitting on a file that is unencrypted on your desktop that can just be nabbed. If it's in the like an iCloud drive or like a Google Drive or something, even worse. Oh my goodness, it's being shipped all around the world in their data centers. So it's important that either like get a password manager, keep that on like a paper document somewhere in a file folder. If you don't want it online, there's all sorts of different things like via authentication apps that you can get on your phone that work as like basically extra authentication on all of your different accounts and things like that. So the idea is that just be vigilant with your passwords and don't just trust that everything's going to be all right. As one day it might not be, and then you're just going to be in a huge hassle of trying to lock down these huge amount of different accounts from everywhere. Don't give telemarketers personal information. I don't know how many people actually answer telemarketer calls, but you know, they still happen here and there. Save paper bank records for at least a year. So if you ever need like proof or something like that of like proof of fraud, or sometimes government agencies will ask for like just weird documents. They're like, oh my goodness, I wish I'd kept this. If any of you deal with OSAP, I'm sure you are familiar with a few things here and there. If you ever had like a different type of review, OSAP starts asking for just these random documents when you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I need to put this together. It's important just to keep organized. It'll make the whole process smoother. And so that's why saving paper copies of bank statements and things like that can really make your life easier if something was to happen. And at the end of the day, it's all about being skeptical and being close guarded when it comes to your personal information. A lot of people will ask for it willy-nilly. Some are nefarious, some aren't. But the idea is that you always want to be very guarded when it comes to that information, as that's who you are, online especially. And so, if by some chance you do become a victim of fraud, the next steps would be contacting your financial institution immediately. So if you know something's happened, you want to start locking down everything. So connecting with your bank is really important. Cancel credit cards or freeze them at least. You can freeze a bank account, say like nothing comes out of my Interact card, for example, until I give the ID back again. There's different things you can do within different financial institutions to basically mitigate damage. You want to notify Canada's credit bureaus. There's two. TransUnion, and Equifax. So you want to tell them that, hey, something's happened. And then from there, at least they know to like, you can like put a freeze on your account. So it's harder to get new credit for the account. And so there's Equifax's website, there's TransUnion's website. You want to contact the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center for advice, and they have a lot of great resources. And you can also notify your local police as soon as you are aware of fraud or theft. So they'll explain more when it comes to if actually something happens, as it does depend on what was stolen and things like that. But these would be the steps you want to keep in mind: is mitigate damage by contacting your banks, notify Canada's credit bureaus so they can lock down any new credit if someone's trying to open up new bank accounts you have no idea about, contact the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, and notify police. So I hope that was helpful as just a brief introduction. If you have any questions, I see the chat was blowing up a little bit as I was talking. This is now kind of like a discussion time, and we'd be happy to go through different things with you. So I'll turn the floor back over to Melanie.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for the presentation, Quinn. It was really great. And I think it's a great stepping point for at least students to be aware about financial goals and also fraud. I think fraud is a very scary thing, and I know for me specifically, I try not to think about it, but if you don't think about it, you might regret it, because it could happen to you. It's very easy to happen to you. And I have people that I know in my life that have been affected by fraud in various different ways. And so it's just important to have that information and have that knowledge with you at all times. So I kind of wrote down some things as Quinn was talking, to give you some time if anyone has any questions. But I thought I would share with some things that I've seen personally with fraud, because Quinn has provided some really great examples, and Quinn and Jesse, if you want to jump in with any personal examples as well. So for me, I find a lot of the times when I'm getting phone calls, and I know Jesse had it too, because it was at the exact same time I was experiencing it. So my phone number, the first 6 digits kept coming up, and the last 4 digits was different. And I kept getting phone calls from this number, and it would change every time. So the last 4 digits might be like 4638, but it's the same 6 digits as my phone number. And they kept serial dialing me, and I never picked up the phone, but that can be a fraudulent phone call for whatever reason. So even if you pick up and start talking, sometimes they record the sound bits on your phone, like when you're having that phone conversation, and then they use those sound bits against you. So it's really important when you pick up the phone and you don't hear anything to immediately hang up. And for me, really the way that I conduct myself is that if it's a really important phone call and I don't really recognize the number, that I let it go to voicemail. And if it's really important, they would leave me a voicemail. So that's kind of how I conduct myself with phone. Another thing that I see a lot, I don't know how people feel about social media, if people are on social media a lot, not on social media a lot, but a caution to you in terms of making sure that your social media is private, just to avoid any sort of fraudsters coming onto your social media and finding personal information about you that then can be used against you. So I know, for example, if you call into Lakehead University, we have secret questions that you would have personally set up with your MyInfo account. And so you might have had questions like, what's your first dog's name? Or what is the street that you lived on as a child? And people do go on Facebook and answer these long questions. There's like 30 questions about yourself. And those answers can be in those posts that you make. So you can answer saying, this is what my dog's name. And then someone could call in, hopefully not at Lakehead University. We do really try to dig when you're calling in to make sure that it is you. But that gives someone access to answers that shouldn't really have access. So just keeping in mind that those things can happen, and not to post really personal information about you in the public eye, just to avoid those things from happening, so you're not getting your identity stolen and things like that. And I'll share another one. So actually one of my friend's moms has been going through a bit of a rough time, and got an email saying that their Netflix account had been, like the credit card on their account wasn't working. And so to to re-put in her information. And with personal circumstances in life, she thought that it was a legit email, and went in and put in her credit card information. And then a couple days go by, and she finds that on her credit card statement that money has been taken off, like thousands of dollars has been taken off of her credit card. And then from there, she called her credit card company, got the card canceled, and reported it, got a new credit card. So the email from Netflix came back in again. This is how easy it is, saying your credit card information is not up to date. Can you please update it? So these fraudsters knew that she canceled the credit card because they couldn't charge anything more to that credit card number, and sent her another email saying your credit card with Netflix is not up to date. And she did it again. And that was the second time she did it, and then realized money was coming out of her account. That's when she pinpointed that it was the Netflix email that had been fraudulent. She didn't even check the email address that it had come to. So it's really just stressing how easy it can be and how diligent you have to be. So we really do encourage you to be as diligent as possible, and be a little bit skeptical of things when you're getting emails and things like that. Just, it's better to be safe than sorry. Thankfully, my friend's mom got all of her money back, and that's the protection that you have with your credit card company, but that can be very scary. And so you want to just be diligent, check the email address that it's coming from, and question some things as well, and call. I would say if there's an email and you're getting it and you're not sure whether or not it's true, look up their website, find the phone number to call, and ask whether or not it's a legit email, and the representative there will be able to tell you wherever you're getting it from. So just being very aware of those things. I'm not sure if Quinn or Jesse has any specific things that they want to add to that, but I thought that would be a good thing to put into this presentation.
Yeah, I think one thing you hit on, Melanie, that I think is really important is the security that comes with credit cards. And so one really big thing is, like, imagine if that was an Interact card that was being used, or even if you're at a grocery store or a gas station and there is a fake PIN pad, which happens, and you put in your debit card, and all of a sudden that money that's coming out of your account is not the credit card company's money, it's your personal savings. Everything you have is being stolen. And so in order to get that money back, you have to go through the bank, and it's a long process. There's no guarantee you're going to get that money back. It is just, they just took your money and you may not see it again. And so that's a really important reason that when you're just using a card daily, is a credit card, while it does have its disadvantages, a huge advantage is that security, is that anytime someone nicks that number and starts taking money off your credit card, they're taking it off of the credit card company's balance sheet, not yours. And the credit card company will just basically they'll eat that cost. And so I highly recommend use a credit card for every daily transaction and just pay it off in full. It is one of the easiest ways to protect yourself.
I might just add too, and we've touched on it, but really the importance of, like kind of Melanie said, being skeptical. So if it sounds like something that somebody shouldn't be asking you over the phone or asking for email, and lots of big companies like banks and things will tell you, like, we won't ask for your password. We're not going to ask for, personal identifying information through means like text messages or phone calls. So being skeptical, I remember, this is a personal experience, but I was even watching some show on TV, and fraudsters are really getting so clever, they'll actually call, and it was something to do with the credit card. So they called and talked to the person about their credit card and said, you need to call the number on the back of your credit card to check this out. So they turned over their credit card. There's a phone number on the back of your credit card. And so they called that number thinking, like, that's legit, it's on the back of my credit card, which that was a real number. But because they were already on the phone immediately before that with the fraudster, there's actually a way on the phone line that if that person immediately dials, because they tell the person, immediately call the number after you hang up with me. And then they can actually, in those few seconds, when they redial that number in the back of their credit card, the person who called you initially can actually, like, transfer that call to them and then scam people that way. So it's so ingrained almost, and so clever in so many different ways that they're devising to scam people. And it's scary, but you know, just be mindful if you're getting this weird call, right, to do that. Like if you haven't noticed anything yourself on your credit card, then why call that number, right? So just being mindful. If it sounds odd, maybe don't do it or question it, right?
Yeah, and there's real people all over the place to call if you have concerns. And I think that's the biggest thing is if, like, there's no harm in being like, oh, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to give your institution a call back. What number do I call? And then just go on the website and just let them like see what was the number I was given. And then just always call the number that's actually on the website is what I will typically do. I will ask for the number so I can give that number to whoever I'm talking to just to see if it's legit. But I only call numbers that I can actually see are on the website itself.
Yeah, I think this is all really great information for students to know. I mean, it's hard. It's a scary thing to think about, and you hope it doesn't happen to you. But that's why we really encourage you to be diligent, and be skeptical. Really, in this circumstance, be skeptical. If they are legit, if you're calling me and I'm asking you questions about your Lakehead University account, you can say like, "Why are you asking me about these things?" And I have to verify your identity. And if I'm legit, I will have a very good reason as to why I'm asking these questions. And it's very easy to find out whether or not someone's legit by confronting them over the phone, like Quinn says. Like, just ask them for their phone number, and then use other means to call back or anything like that. So do your investigative research, I would say, and don't take everything at face value. I'm trying to think of what I was just about to say. Yeah, like, and a lot of bank companies, like when I call into my bank, they'll ask me questions related to my bank account. And so they'll ask me questions like, what's your credit limit, and what's the name on the account, what's the phone number or email associated with the account, what are your last purchases. So when you call in, those are legit things when you're asking about your banking information, but that's when you're calling in, not when they're calling you. And I don't really think banks ever really call you unless you have like a representative there that you work with directly, and in which case you would know their email or phone number, and you would know them personally, and you would know that voice as well, hopefully. So yeah, just encouraging you to be skeptical as much as possible in this circumstance. Not always, but in this circumstance, just to protect yourself as much as possible, and knowing where to go. Quinn had really great resources on that last slide on what happens if you are a victim, because there is support and services out there for you. And if you are a victim, don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. As I said, it's very easy. My friend's mom did it twice within a week, right? And so don't be embarrassed about that, but you want to report it so that someone else doesn't also have that same experience happening to them. Because once that phone number is in the hands of the anti-fraud prevention and the police and things like that, they can be dealt with accordingly. But if you don't bring that to the people's attention that need to be notified, these things can go under the radar too, and that's how it's $405 million in fraud in 2 years, right? So don't be embarrassed, and let people know that this has happened, so we can collectively keep each other safe, I would say. I don't see any questions, to be quite honest, so I don't know if it's kind of hard to ask questions about this, to be quite honest. We're not experts on fraud or anything like that, but our experiences as well, I hope, at least helps you and keeps you conscious moving forward about these things. Yeah. Is there anything else that either of you would like to add?
I guess one thing is security questions. As someone who works in Student Central, we get this all the time. When a company or any sort of website is asking you to make security questions, it's important that you make questions that you're going to remember 5, 10, 20 years from now. You want to make sure they're rock solid, because those are like the key questions that are going to determine whether we can give you information 20 years from now when you don't remember your MyInfo account. And you need to order a transcript because you're doing a master's program way later. Like, it's really important that you put some effort into those security questions and make sure that you're going to remember them, or at the very least, write them down.
I agree with that. I mean, all three of us have been working at Lakehead for quite some time. I'm sure Jesse has some experience as well, but I know that I've asked students questions. There are secret questions that they have set up and they would have done themselves, and it would be something like, this is something I would discourage. What's your favorite food? Unless you are rock solid on that for the next 20 years of your life, do not put that as your secret question, because I know, like, my secret food or my favorite food might have changed from this year to last year and things like that. And I'll be like, was it lasagna or was it chocolate? And I get that a lot, actually. So it needs to be things that are rock solid, like Quinn said, and things that you will immediately remember, and you're not kind of scratching your head over, for sure.
But also not too easy, I think, is the other piece. And maybe we already said that, but I get so many that's like, what's my last name? What's my mother's name? Things that could very easily, by somebody who somewhat knows you or follows you on social media, could easily answer those questions, right? So you get to put secret questions in a lot of different things, like your CRA account. All different things usually have some sort of secret question piece of the identification process. So just, again, making them solid, but also something that's unique to, you need to remember it, but also has to be something that's very unique to, that you would know personally, and that people close to you even couldn't know, because you never know, again, somebody in your friend group or somebody on social media that is in your immediate group could have that information still, if it's not, super identifiable or super unique, I guess, to yourself. So just keep that in mind. Not too easy, but also something you'll remember, years down the road.
Yeah. A student question came in. Many times you have to make security questions, or you can't make them, and it just gives you options, like a drop down. Like the CRA, I know, for example, is a drop down menu, and you pick one and you put that answer in. Sometimes there are things like, what's your mom's maiden name? And many people might know that. So is there a way around it? I mean, it really depends. I would pick the question that you are most likely to answer correctly and remember, but also not everyone would know. I mean, for me, I know my mom's maiden name is not common, and not many people would know it, I would think. Hopefully, I guess. And so I would use that because I felt comfortable knowing that not many people should be able to answer that question without it being me, kind of thing. So, I mean, unfortunately, sometimes there's no way around that, but what we would really encourage you to do is pick the question that you are most likely to answer correctly and remember in 10, 15, 20 years, but also picking something that not a lot of people would know. And so I think that really jumps off of my Facebook thing right there, is that it asks you questions like, what's your childhood best friend's name, or who did you go to prom with, or what was your pet's name as a child, and things like that. And those things you want to keep secret, really, because those things fade over time for everyone else, really, but you. And that's where you want to use those to your advantage and answer those questions. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Sometimes there isn't a way around it, but
yeah, one thing that I've done in the past is just made like a secret question persona. It gets a little bit more complicated, so maybe it's not necessarily the best for everyone. But like, yes, like I have parents and people know those things. So if you wanted, it's an idea that I've definitely dabbled in terms of just making secret questions that is like, this is my fake family, that is only used for secret questions. I remember it because it's something that I do, but it is a way around some of those things that you might have really common answers where you can just make up less common answers, but the trick is remembering that.
That's interesting. I've honestly never heard of that.
I was going to say something along those lines too. Like, I understand sometimes there are chosen questions. I always try to choose the most, if you only have to pick 3 from a list of 10 or 15, the most obscure ones, I guess, that, like a childhood hero or something like that. And then I can kind of tailor it to something I know I haven't discussed with people, but still was an influential person in my life or something, right? So I try to choose the little more obscure ones that I can maybe be flexible with the answer and still remember it. Another thing too, I was going to say, sometimes there's a question actually, and I'll pick it, and it might be that the answer is actually like nowhere or something. So it might be a question like, where's the first place you rented or something. If you've never rented, that's kind of a good question that you could say like nowhere. Well, nowhere could be your answer. Somebody looking at that question would expect you to have rented somewhere and have an address or something. But sometimes you could just actually, your answer can be nobody or nowhere, and it's almost like a trick question, I find. So sometimes I use that too as a tip. So.
Yeah, really great information. I mean, I'm learning things as well. I never knew about a persona. So
yeah, I guess moving on to that, I will just put another little plug into passwords. those is another one. I've been guilty of it. I've been guilty of the word passwords. Like, I'll just have certain words, and I'm like, oh, that's good enough. It doesn't necessarily cut it anymore. That may have been fine 10 years ago, but nowadays it really doesn't work. And like, I don't know about how many of you use like a central email for everything. Think back and wonder, what is the password that you use for that email? Is it a really easy one to guess from like a computer generating it? Because if it is, all it takes is one person to figure out, like, I'm going to grab your Gmail account this day. And now all of a sudden they have access to literally every app part of your life. It's the email you use for literally everything. So I think it's important just to be diligent, that beef up your passwords, make them complicated, make them to the point where you probably won't be able to guess them just by sitting in front of a computer and being like, oh, what's that password? Oh, I know it. It's worth it to just start relying on either password managers or just have a little note somewhere. Even if it's like just an encrypted note in a notepad in your iPhone or something like that. But just something where it's not so easy to guess, because you don't want to lose access to that central email if that's what you use.
Right. I mean, you hear about it all the time, and it kind of scares you. You get like that jolt, like, oh, that's scary. I'm going to go change all my passwords right now. And I've had those moments too, where I'm like, oh, how long ago did I change that password? Or have I ever changed that password, kind of thing. So, and it's also really important on the topic of passwords to not reuse that password for every single account that you have, because once a person gets that one password, they can pretty much guess your password for everything if you have the same password over and over again. So being really diligent in if you have multiple email accounts, having different passwords for those email accounts, and your banking account shouldn't be the same password as your email, and things like that. So really being conscious about all of this, and maybe go home and change your passwords after this presentation. I know that I did it probably about a year ago, where I changed all of my passwords altogether, and then periodically every couple months I will change at least one password, so that it's not, they can't find a chain on me. So it's not like they can get into every single account that I have. If they get into one thing, they're probably only getting into one or two of my personal accounts or anything like that, which, I mean, is horrible in itself, but at least it's not as bad as all of my accounts. So I think that's a great discussion. No more questions or anything like that from what I can see. So I'll end it here. Thank you so much for everyone that's joined us today. We have one